Hello, egg lovers. This is Erin, aka Hanky Pasanky. So today I'm starting some work on a custom order for what will be a wyvern egg. So going from the dragon eggs that we all know and love that I've been doing for years and doing something just a little bit different. So the client started out with, a question and a very standard request. And so I asked, and a screenshot of source material. So I asked for a little bit more information so that I could do a little bit more research on my own to see like what kind of texture and what kind of color and what kind of size we'd be looking for. And I dug up some more stuff on the interwebs, just found a few more pictures with a little bit higher quality. And I'm going to be going off of this particular fandom, which is based on a video game. And we're going to start with, at least this first one is going to be a Fire Wyvern Egg. So what I want to eventually get is the idea of sort of a lava rock, obviously, on the outside. And then once I etch down, I'll be able to get some much brighter colors. Because the one thing I'll be fighting against with the emu egg is that it's naturally a little bit greenish. And I want to go red. So I'm going to, even though this starting surface, this is a slightly older emu egg, so it has already darkened a bit. It's more of an olive. It's a really nice rocky gray. It's got some really good pebbly texture to it, which is why I picked this particular one instead of some that are smoother, because I want that pebbly, rocky quality to it, and I'm going to keep that. So I did clean it with vinegar and then with ivory soap ivory dish soap to get it nice and clean. My hands are also nice and clean and very dry, so if they look super dry and scaly, that's why, because there's no lotion on them because I'm working on an egg and the lotion will ruin everything. Then I was just making sure there was no moisture left inside that hole that I will be plugging before I start any dyeing. So I am going to put color on the outside of this before I start etching in the scales. And I'm going to do that so that just in case there's any fading over time, that emu eggs can naturally, they start with like sort of a teal green, and then they get darker into this olive green, and then they get even darker into almost black, and then they start lightening back through like brown and can eventually bleach to white, but only if they're out in like direct sunlight in the hot Australian sun for hours and hours and days. That's clearly not going to happen, but I don't want it to ever lose the fiery magma kind of quality. So I am going to start by giving it some red and then some more black on top of the red to make sure that it stays that good, the color that I want it to, even if there is any color differentiation over years, which there won't be because, I use a UV resistant finish, but, because I want this to last and because I want this to be, I strive for perfection, obviously, always. I want it to stay exactly the way that it should stay. So I'm going to start by plugging the hole, and that'll just be with wax, obviously. You can use plugs. Plugs definitely work. There's like little silicone plugs that you can add in. I do have silicone plugs of a few different sizes. Some of these actually might work pretty well. Let's see. Or I might do a silicone plug and then, no, I didn't make this hole in this emu egg. It came to me this way. This is one of the largest ones I have, which is from a plumbing supply. So it's a 000 size, whatever that is. Plumbing places can have nice big ones, but generally, yeah. This is not an emu egg from Jeff Ritchie of Ritchie Ranch because he makes teeny tiny little beautiful holes. I also usually get my eggs from him whole so that I can etch them while they're intact and while they'll sink in vinegar. No, I don't have any bigger plugs than that. So we're going to do this the old-fashioned way with wax. And we're going to do this with a traditional Delrin Kiska. Heavy. It is super, super ancient. This guy is so old that it is, you can almost see how worn down that tip is. It's very worn down, which isn't good if you wanted to make a nice, subtle, distinct line, but is fantastic if you want to just flood an area with a huge amount of wax, which I do. I use Ukrainian Accessories electric kiski when I'm doing detail work, because the extra fine and the extra fine, I love those for especially working on quail eggs, where you need really, really teeny tiny lines, and they're perfect for that. But when I want to get huge areas filled up, I want to get something hotter than electric kiski will actually go, because it would be dangerous for an electric kiski to stay as hot as I want this to be. And I'm working with some candles that I made out of beeswax, so they're 100% beeswax candles. So I can just use the wax from the candle. And this is going to take a very long time. So I'm going to start by building up a little bit of wax around the hole to give everything something to stick to. I'm going to just take off a little chunk of this wax, soften it. Ow. Got my finger a little too close to the flame there. Don't recommend that. Don't burn yourself. And if you have cats, like many of us do, don't leave your candles lit. Yeah, thank you, Nico, for chiming in. Don't leave your candles lit, because I found they really like to just stick their faces right in there, and then they singe their whiskers, and that smells terrible. So I want to get this just about the same size as the hole. Hopefully without dropping it in there. Good. So it doesn't quite fill the hole, and that's fine, because this would work better if I had more wick. This is a very low flame. Come on, come on, come back to me. Come back to me, little candle flame. I need you. There we are. Nope, it went out. Oh well. Let's see if I have enough hot wax. I don't think I do. I just want to seal it around the edges. And then I'll just use the heat of my finger to kind of get it into place a little bit more. And then anytime you're working on a big egg, like an ostrich egg or a rhea egg or an emu egg, one of the nice things is that if you do your fill right off the bat, before you do all the prep, you can, I know I have a toothpick here somewhere. There we are. If you do your wax plug first, then you can just sand it down. If you do a little light sand, Brillo pad also works just fine. But like 100, 220 grit sandpaper, which you're going to want to use on an ostrich egg or rhea egg anyways, to take down the shine and take off that outer surface that will repel dye, and that your wax will just fall right off of sometimes in water or in dye. And that's a bummer when your wax falls off, because then you lose all the work and you have to go back to the previous color. Ugh, no fun. But if you sand those eggs a little bit, it'll give you a good solid surface for taking dye, and it will also sand off any extra wax. So then you don't end up with a slight ring around the hole, which I will have. I will have just a tiny bit, like an obvious ring, and I'll just drill that off at the very end before I seal the hole. And that will give me a smooth surface to work on. So what I want to make sure here is that the edges are sealed. The edges are sealed. I'll just do a quick flood over it to make sure there's no holidays where liquid can get in and ruin any of my work. Yay! Ooh. All right, step one. Oh, maybe step two. If step one was prep, this is step two. Okay, now we're ready to give it some dye without getting the dye inside the egg. Okay, and I keep my dyes on, let's just take a little trip over here. I just have a little cart that I keep my dyes on in mason jars and mix them in mason jars and then store them in mason jars. It's just easier for everyone, for consistency. A lot of people will store their dyes in plastic jars, which is totally fine. It's lighter weight. You can usually get a better seal on a lid, which is very useful. However, then you'd have two things to clean and use later on. Where's my gloves? Right, I'm gonna glove up for this before I stick my fingers into dye. I'm gonna start with Ukrainian Accessories Okanagan wine, which is a really deep wine red. And I'm going for a deep red, a dark red, because it has to be dark enough to overpower the natural green in the emu eggshell. The pint jar is obviously not large enough to stick an emu egg into, so I'm going to pour this into a quart jar temporarily. Got my paper towel ready for drying once it's done. Doesn't submerge all the way, which is fine. I'll just do a little roll around what will be the top, which I want to be a little bit lighter anyways, and it will be lighter in the end. And then I'll give it a slightly longer soak in the bottom, because it will eventually have a slight ombre effect, darker at the bottom, lighter at the top. Brighter at the top, so more of a flaming hot magma for the top and more of a darkened, cooled magma at the bottom, if you will, since we're going with fire. And this might end up being the only color that I need. Once it's dry, I will paint on some black also, but I'm going to paint it on with a big old brush so that I can control a bit of a mottled effect and not have it just be totally solid, because anytime you submerge an egg in dye, obviously you're going to have good solid coverage. I'll just pat it dry. We never rub dye, we only pat. You can see that it pooled a little bit in the wax plug, and that's great. And ooh, look at that! It's like a delicious Merlot. Makes me thirsty. If you don't know the trick about Viva paper towels, they're sort of miraculous. Been using the same paper towel for a few years now. Downside is that there might be a few cat hairs on it. That's okay. They'll come off once it's dry. And some spots are already drying faster than others. Awesome. And you may be wondering what this is. This is my working surface. It's just a small turntable, maybe like a 9-inch turntable, which is really nice when you're working on big eggs or heavy eggs. Pour the dye back in. That's good to go back into storage. So this is a pretty powerful dye. It does not need a long soak. The Orca Black needs a little bit of a longer soak when that happens. That's okay. Then I've got a little bean bag on there wrapped in a hand towel. These washcloths, I like them. They're really easy to wash. It may look dirty, it's not. It's actually right out of the dryer. My cats are fighting over a paper bag. It's really cute. If you're hearing weird background noises, that's what it is. Okay, and now I'm gonna let this dry for a while until it's totally dry and ready for the next level of treatment.